I don't want to take too much time, as Maulana has already mentioned, that there's a scarcity of time, and there are scholars here who are far greater than me in every possible aspect, who I do not wish to speak in front of, but I have been requested to say a couple of things, and inshallah I'll try my best to summarize them to the best of my ability. I want to start off with mentioning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that He shall never ever punish a group of people until He sends to them messengers. And He makes that very clear. And then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends messengers, He explains to us in the Quran as to why He sends them. And He says He sends these messengers so that they can teach the people. They can educate the people, they can guide the people to the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They teach them the Quran, they teach them the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They teach them about tawheed, about monotheism. They guide them, they nurture them, they purify their souls from evil, and they perfect them to be the best of human beings that they can. That's the job and purpose of the Anbiya. One of the many wisdoms as to why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends them. So if there was not a prophet, Allah makes it clear, we will not punish you if you did not have a prophet. What does that show us? That shows us that human beings are in dire need of a prophet to safeguard them, to protect them, and to teach them what is right, and to teach them what is wrong. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends these prophets. But after the coming of the greatest of creation, Sayyiduna Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the chain of sending messengers would stop. And the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam is the final and the last messenger. And there will not be a messenger after him sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And that is not the aqeedah of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, rather that is the aqeedah of every single Muslim. Anybody who denies this is no longer a Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ is the final messenger, and there will not be a messenger after him sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So the question arises, where do we then get that guidance from? Where are we then supposed to take our morality from? Where do we take our ethics from? Where do we learn to differentiate between right and wrong? And when a person becomes confused, and we have people who wish and who make dua, and they say that, I wish I was in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. I consider this a dua that should not be made. Why? Because what you are doing in reality is questioning the will and the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah willed you to be in this particular time and in this particular place. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does that through the attribute of irada. When we study kalam, we teach this to our teachers, our students, sorry. So you are here for a particular reason and a purpose. Now how are you going to get that guidance? Whenever you think about this question, remember the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A very famous hadith, quoted and taught multiple times to every student of knowledge. But think about it this way, that the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Al-ulama'u warathatul anbiya, that the scholars are the inheritors of the Prophets alaihi salatu wasalam. So the guidance that was taught and brought by the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not finish at the demise of him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rather, the baton was passed on by the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam to afdalul bashar ba'd al-anbiya bit-tahqiq Sayyiduna Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. And then it went from him to all the Sahaba, to the Tabi'een, to the Atba'ut Tabi'een, to the ulama, to the scholars, and then it passed down generation after generation. So the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not stopped. That guidance will continue until the end of time by who? Al-ulama. The scholars are the people that will guide the communities. The scholars are the people who will teach people from right and wrong. The scholars are the people who will safeguard the faith and the iman of Muslims not only in the West but all around the globe. It is through the ulama that we receive our guidance. And that is why it is so important and imperative, not for the awam but the scholars who graduate, the students of knowledge who are under study at the moment, to understand what it means to be a scholar. It's not that you study a couple of books and you leave and that's it, you're done. And you walk around with a title and you walk around in a lavish jubba and clothing and a big hat. And that's it, that's what it means to be a scholar. No, you are an inheritor of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. You have a job and you have a task. I'll mention 4 things which summarize the job of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. The very first is that the messengers alayhi salatu wasalam, what do? They disseminate the knowledge of the Quran. That's your very first duty and responsibility. You teach the Quran to people and you educate them about the Quran. The second thing, the Anbiya impart wisdom. Knowledge in and of itself is not sufficient. We know, and our scholars always tell us stories, that there are people who have knowledge, then there are people who have knowledge and wisdom, and those are the foremost of us. Those people who have knowledge and wisdom, they end up doing more work than a person who might have studied more books, because they were granted wisdom, which is a trait of the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam. 2 things, teach the Quran. Second thing, impart wisdom. Third thing, purify the souls of people. Allah mentions regarding the Anbiya, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, what do? They purify the souls of people. And that purity is achieved through the science and the teachings of tasawwuf. 3 things, yes? The Quran. The second thing, wisdom. The third thing, tasawwuf, spirituality. And the fourth thing, and the most important I believe, is that they protect the people from the fitna of their times. That is the job of the ulama, to protect and safeguard the minds of their communities regarding the trials and tribulations they are facing. But this can only happen when a student studies adequately, and they study properly, and they exert their effort in attaining the best knowledge that they can. As Shaykh Siddiq was mentioning earlier, you have to be a mudaqqiq. You have to go into the intricacies and the details. Reading surface level is not sufficient in this day and age. As Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah said in his very famous couplet, أخي لن تنال العلم إلا بست سأنبيك عن تفصيلها ببيان ذكاء وحرص واجتهاد وبلغة وصحبة أستاذ وطول زمان. Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah said that you will never attain knowledge unless you have these 6 things. What are they? ذكاء, you have the intellectual capacity. You are intelligent. The second thing, وحرص, you possess passion and eagerness for the knowledge that you are attaining. The third thing, واجتهاد, exertion. You work hard, you put your time and you put your effort into studying the sciences. وَبُلْغَةٌ, and you have competency or means to study. And the 5th thing was صُحْبَةُ أُسْتَاذٍ, and you have the companionship and the suhbah of a teacher. Okay, you have the companionship and the suhbah of a true teacher. وَطُولُ زَمَانٍ, طُولُ زَمَانٍ, this is the one that has been lost in our times. Wallahi al-Azim, I was speaking to Maulana Zain from Black Burnley the other day, and he said, it's so sad that the teachers have to cater courses which finish in 5 years for students of knowledge, because the people are not attracted. If you tell them this course is going to last 20 years, nobody's going to sign up. But in reality, you only become a scholar after that much study. Nobody becomes a scholar in 5 years. Don't fool yourself and don't let anybody fool you. Yes, including myself. I advertise a Dars in Islamic course for 5 years. I don't call my graduates scholars. They're just students of knowledge, that's what they are. They will become scholars in their own time. Our job, as Mufti Sahib Qibla mentioned it at our graduation, that our job, the job of the teachers, is to put the student on the straight path, on the right path, and the rest is up to you yourself. How well do you want to take them tools that the teachers gave to you, and where are you going to use them and utilize them? Okay? And the final couple of things I wish to mention. The greatest trial and the greatest fitna of our time is what? Is irrational thinking. And I boil it down to this, irrational thinking. Why? Because it is through irrational thinking that the 3 most common ideologies that threaten our existence, not in terms of our wujud, but our intellectual existence, come from irrational thinking. What are they? You've heard them a million times. Atheism, feminism, and liberalism. 3 isms, they derive from irrational thinking. The way to combat that, and wallahi al-azim, I swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I personally do not consider any graduate to be even worthy of called a scholar if they have not studied mantiq. Because we are not going to be able to tackle these issues if we do not have the tools of logic and philosophy amongst ourselves. Our graduates will not be able to stand in front of an atheist and even debunk his theories because they are weak in the science of mantiq and theology. Okay, so it's very important that we teach our students these sciences and they study them themselves so that they can safeguard the communities, because at the end of the day, the alim will be the leader of that community. If the leader is incapable, if the leader does not have the mental capacity to be able to fight and tackle these issues in our era, what are we going to say about the community themselves? Yes, it's the job and the responsibility of the alim to protect his congregation from these things. And final things, a couple of words of advice. The first thing is, our teachers would always say to us that what is the difference between a well-read lay person and a scholar? What is the difference between a well-read lay person and a scholar? Our teachers would say that the only thing that differentiates a well-read lay person from a scholar is his command of the Arabic language. That's the only thing that will differentiate a well-read lay person between a scholar. Any lay person can go out and read translations of Arabic books in English. You can go out, there is a library of English books that people could read. If a lay person is to read that, what is the difference between him and you? The only thing that differentiates you is your command of the Arabic language. Through the Arabic language, you can go back to the original sources and you do not have to rely on translations. That's what our teachers would tell us. So the one word of advice I will give you, you can study hadith, you can study all of these sciences, but if your Arabic is weak, it does not benefit you at all. Make sure you work on your sarf, your nahv, and your Arabic adab. Become proficient in Arabic. And by Arabic, I don't mean speaking, because there's a craze of people wanting to speak Arabic. I don't mean that. I mean Arabic where you can pick up, as Shaykh Siddiq was mentioning, you can pick up hidayah, you can read it, translate it, extrapolate from it yourself because of the command that you have on the Arabic language. The second piece of advice is, as Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah, Hujjatul Islam, Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah said, Al-ilmu bila amalin jununun wal amalu bila ilmin la yakun. Imam al-Ghazali makes it very clear. He said, knowledge without action is insanity, and action without knowledge does not occur. What does he mean there? You can have the most amount of knowledge. Yes, people tend to flaunt their knowledge these days and say, I've studied Mantiq till Qazi Mubarak, what have you studied? Yes, that doesn't matter. How well can you apply that science? Yes, even in terms of the science itself, it's not about the books you've studied. How much of a grasp do you have on that science itself? That's one aspect. The second aspect is, if you study all of these books and it does not bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it was all useless. Imam al-Ghazali, read his Ayyuhal Walad, he makes it very clear. If all of them hours you spent in classes learning from your teachers does not even motivate you to stand up in the middle of the night to perform, forget the Hajj, that's enough, to even perform Fajr on time, what benefit has that knowledge brought you? Al-ilmu bila amal junun, wal-amalu bila ilmin la yakun. And this is a word of advice for the congregants, for the community, that you can't have action without knowledge. You must first seek knowledge so that you are able to carry out that action properly. And finally, I'll finish with the words of advice of Qibla Mufti Shamsul Huda Sahab, that he said on our graduation, and wallahi al-azim, I take his words of advice very seriously. He said to us that your teachers, our Qibla Mufti Aslam Bandialwi, one of our teachers, he would say, ye to Allama hai, Shah Sahab hai, Badshah hai, Peer hai. He would say that, and Mufti Sahab said to us, Shah Sahab, ye na samjhe ki aap Mufti Sahab ne keh diya to aap Allama ho gaye. Nahin. Yes, it's not that Mufti Sahab says it out of love. Okay, similarly, if your teachers call you alim or maulana, or people call you alim or maulana, don't ever let that get to your head. Yes, you are no alim, you are no scholar, you are no allama. Me neither. Yes, our teachers say this out of love. We need to think of ourselves as juhal. Okay, because every time you think you're a jahil, as Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah said, as soon as you stop thinking you're a jahil, you can never become a scholar. Yes, always think that you do not know, because that will motivate you to go out there and seek more and more and more. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be seekers of knowledge for the rest of our lives until we are in our graves.